Hi, this is Kit with Scrapbook Warehouse. Today we're going to be making a card with Crackle texture paste. First I put my craft mat down and then I get a piece of watercolor paper in the size that I want my card to be. I put some removable adhesive on the back of it and secure it to the craft mat. I take my stencil and position it where I want the design to be on the card. I use washi tape, or you could just use masking tape to secure the stencil down. Now I've got my texture paste. This is a crackle, so it's going to dry with lots of beautiful aged cracks in it. It's important to use a light hand when putting on crackle paste, as well as make sure the paste is all the way up the length of the palette knife itself. Now I'm going to lift up my stencil and see if I'm happy with it. Make sure to clean your stencil and palette knife right away, because the crackle paste will harden and you won't be able to clean it later. I use my pokey tool to release the edges of the card, and then I clean up any extra paste with the edge of my finger. That'll make sure I have a clean edge once this dries. Once my card front has dried for a few hours, I glue it with removable adhesive to my craft mat to hold it down, and then I use some oxide inks. This is the kind of project that doesn't always look good when you first start, but as you layer more and more colors, it comes together. That's the beauty of the oxide inks, the blending ability. When I'm working on a project like this and I'm not quite sure about my colors, I line them up in the order that I'm going to use them, and then I go back afterwards and adjust my colors. As you can see, the red is quite strong, so it always helps to have a little piece of toss-away cardstock to the side. I use that just to take off a little bit of the extra pigment. Now I'm going to go back and adjust my colors and get the blend that I want. At this point, my pad got contaminated with a darker color, so I just used a baby wipe to clean that right up. I always love vintage photo as an accent color, and on this one I used it all over the edges. That just gives it a darker, more vignette look. To match my color palette, I toned down the vintage photo with a bit of iced spruce. I wanted to distress the whole look, so I spritzed it a few times with water. While that's drying, I'm going to cut out all the embellishments for the front of my card. A few of the dyes I used today are by Penny Black and Sizzix. First, we have the flourish from Penny Black, which is such a beautiful floral dye. You could use it for something cute or something elegant, either way, very versatile. And then I also have the Sizzix Thinlits, and it's a label dye, and you actually get 17 different types of pieces. It's such a high value dye. You'll use it in all your card making. Because I wanted to add some color to my label, but I still wanted to leave the edges white, I just put it back in its dye, and then I attached it with some washi tape. Now when I go over it with the oxide ink, it's going to leave a beautiful, clear white border. You can use this for any dye in your toolbox. I pull my label out of the dye, and then I use a bit of vintage photo along the edge to make the label stand out on the card. Now I've got my hugs dye, and I'm going to use more vintage photo on it, just so that I can use clear embossing powder on it later. Now I'm ready for the clear embossing powder. When I'm embossing little small pieces like this, I always like to put it in a glass bowl or small box. That keeps me from burning my fingers, which is always great, as well as keeps the piece from flying off and avoids little tweezer marks on my piece. At this point, I realized I die cut with the wrong hugs dye, so I redid it with an Avery L hugs dye instead. They both look nice, but this was really the one I wanted in the first place. Now it's time for me to color my flower flourishes. There's no special technique here, just do it until you're happy with it, with the colors you like. I'm going to put some music on now for you, and we'll be back in a few moments. Because I'm like any crafter and somewhat disorganized, my next step I'm going to use something on hand because I couldn't find my normal rounding tool, so I just used the other end of my pokey tool to add texture and dimension to my flowers. Now, normally when putting together a card, I advocate using gravity to do it, and that will help you line the bottom of your card front with your card base. Except this time it wasn't working all that great, so I laid it flat instead and attached it. When card making, it's always a good idea to have a variety of adhesives on hand, and I use several different kinds in this card. So I use adhesive dots, and that allows me to put on a perfect embellishment that has been delicately die cut out. I use some 3D pop-ups that gives dimension to my card, and then I'm actually going to use the multimedia mat. And why I like this is I can use it on small details, thin details, and if it seeps out from underneath, no one's going to be able to know because it's not shiny. So as you can see, I'm adjusting and fixing where all my flowers want to go. The nice thing about paper is that it's a little bit flexible in that area. Now I'm going to cut out some little dots from the pop-up foam, and using my pokey tool, I'm going to use them underneath my flowers. That'll give me some shadow and dimension in my card. So once I've glued down all my embellishments, I realized there was something missing. Just a little bit of reddish pink in the middle of each flower to make them really pop. It's always good to let yourself play a little bit. If your card doesn't feel completely finished, add these little tiny extras. It really makes it special. And I'm also going to use the glossy accents on the middle of each flower just to make them glittery and pretty, like the hugs. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, all the products today are listed in the link above or below the video. If you're on our website, just scroll down. Don't miss a class by subscribing to us on YouTube. Thanks so much, and happy crafting!